There is a troubling rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans in the United States. The advocacy group Stop AAPI Hate says more than 3,000 anti-Asian incidents have been reported nationwide since the start of the pandemic. The organization tracks violence and harassment against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. New York City alone reports an 800% increase in Asian hate crime victims compared to the year before. While not all crimes against Asian Americans are labeled as hate crimes, advocates say the community is being targeted. They believe it's driven by misinformation about COVID-19. Some blame the rise of anti-Asian American discrimination on former President Trump's rhetoric in his description of the pandemic. For more on this, I want to bring in Manjusha Kulkarni and Andrew Wang. Manjusha is co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate. She is also the executive director of the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council. And Andrew is a freelance writer. Thank you both for being here. Manjusha, I want to come to you first. Activists and lawmakers say the attacks against the Asian American community have not been getting enough attention. What do you make of the federal response so far, and what more should be done to address this issue?
We're heartened by the federal response from President Biden and the administration. We think it's a promising first step, especially in light of what we saw last year from President Trump and his administration. As you noted in the introductory segment, we've received over 3,000 self-reported incidents of hate from across the country. And so what we need now is urgent action. We need more resources from our federal, state, and local government. And we really need our governmental officials to work with local communities and community members to begin to really turn the tide against hate of Asian Americans. And
Manjusha, what do you attribute to this spike, more than an 800% increase in Asian American hate crimes in just the last year in New York City? Is it because of misinformation about the pandemic? What is going on?
Well, there are many factors at play. Unfortunately, hate directed at Asian American Pacific Islander communities is not new. Most notably, we saw it with the Chinese Exclusion Act in the late 1800s, and of course in the 1900s, the Japanese American incarceration. Unfortunately, what's going on now is tied to the pandemic, and certainly President Trump's racist rhetoric contributes to this problem, calling it the Wuhan virus, calling it the China virus and Kung flu, really fan the flames of hate and put people in harm's way. And we know that because at Stop AAPI Hate, many of the reports we received were of incidents that perpetrators used the president's language against individuals in our communities.
Andrew, I'm going to bring you into this conversation because in a column for the Washington Post, you wrote, quote, "We must be careful in our heartbreak. Inequality in America is a disease with many expressions. Only by rooting out our shared suffering can we protect the beautiful, manifold lives of our loved ones." Can you please go a little bit deeper into the message that you're trying to convey here?
Sure. So this opinion piece, this essay actually started with a story. And it was a story about my great uncle. And this happened many years ago when I was very young. But what happened was my great uncle was on a walk with his wife, my great aunt. And he had almost made it back to his house when all of a sudden he was shot and killed on the street unprovoked. And my family never found out who did it, nor did we find out the race of the perpetrators. But to me, that wasn't the point. The point as I grew older, as I sort of gained the language to understand what was going on, was to try and see the larger forces at play: poverty, systemic xenophobia, and to take that and ultimately in writing this, because some of the video footage showed young Black men as the perpetrators, to say that when we look deeper into this issue, there's a greater argument for solidarity between minority communities than for further conflict.
I'm wondering, as an Asian American man with whom your family history with your uncle's death, it's so deeply personal, have you felt similar incidences of hate or discrimination directed against you or other members of your family in the last year?
Absolutely. As I write about in my op-ed, in last March, my mother called me and said, "Hey, I know people are starting to wear masks right now, but it's not common practice yet. So just be careful. If you wear a mask, it might make you a target as somebody who's ostensibly sick." I remember because I was a senior in college right before we were sent home because of COVID, I was at the bar with my best friend. And when I got up to get her drinks, another man came by and kicked her chair down and yelled coronavirus. So absolutely.
I'm sorry for those incidences. But Manjusha, if we're being real, hate crimes are nothing new in the United States. We saw a huge spike in crimes against South Asian and Middle Eastern communities in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Do you see the same root cause in this latest spike in violence?
That's right. We did see so much of a backlash against South Asian Americans and Muslim Americans after 9/11. And it really is some of the same type of incidents and phenomena, which are that Asian Americans, unfortunately, are seen too often as perpetual foreigners. And that's perhaps because of the way we look, because of our more recent immigration. And that's why I think it's so important for us to stand together, to have public officials who support our communities, and also to have policies that provide resources to each and every community member to make sure we have strong civil rights protections going forward. And I think that's what we're advocating now is, as we try to heal as a nation from what's happening, we need our lawmakers behind us, and we need policies that protect our communities.
Last question for you, Andrew, because you write so beautifully in your op-ed about this experience for you and how personal it is. I'm wondering if you can share a message not just for your fellow Asian Americans in these difficult times, but so much has been made about seeing those videos, those terrible videos of people being attacked and questions about people standing by. So what is your message not only for members of the Asian American community, but members of the greater American community in trying to combat these attacks?
So I would say that I am a part of a grieving family, not a hateful one. And the love I have for my great uncle and what he wanted to become here is greater than the hate I could have for an individual perpetrator whom we didn't know. The love I have for the safety of my people is greater than the hate I could possibly invent for an entire group of people. And ultimately, hate is not going to get us there. And I think in my grief that I write about, if it is a kind of love, then let us grieve. Let us grieve. We don't want to be bothered. And what I mean by that is we don't want to be weaponized. We're weaponized enough. Say in the affirmative action debate, whenever Black Americans bring up structural discrimination, there's someone to say, but look at this Asian American. Look at how he has good grades. Look at how his family's wealthy. You can do it too. This is a non-issue. I don't wish to be weaponized anymore, right? We should say, like, what does it mean to be left alone? What does it mean to want to go on a walk and feel that we can get home safely? What does it mean to want to take the subway to work or to close up shop and get home safely, to pray to whatever God we believe in, to grow up, to grow old? Ultimately, I think Black Americans, this is something that they've wanted as well, and this is something that they fought for and paved the way for us. And now it's up to us to continue taking on that mantle, to not let this divide us, to look at history, to look at how conflict has been built into our communities, instead of assuming that when we see an anecdote on TV, when we see video footage, that that's enough for us to make our decisions about what we want. And for Chinese speakers out there, I think they understand when I say we call this country 美国, which means beautiful nation. And we very much have a chance to get there, but it depends on how we treat each other. It depends on the patience, the care, and the compassion that we take when we look at what is a very complex but not impossible issue.
Andrew Wang, Manjusha Kulkarni, thank you both.